Hello. Good morning, afternoon, something like that. You people are looking very alive. So thanks for coming out to PuppetConf. This is my, I don't know, fifth one or something ludicrous like that. But good to see people, especially people that I haven't seen in a while. So there's going to be a bunch of pretty awesome talks. I'm not saying that because I'm actually giving one in this room at 2 p.m. But let's be honest, you want this. First up is Randall Hansen. Randall is pretty great, unmistakably recognizable, I think. He's one of the few people I know whose visage in real life actually looks like what a gravatar would look like, I think, which is really great. Randall is awesome. He heads up all of Puppet Lab's design, and not much else to say. He's Randall. He fights for the users, the state of user experience. Randall Hansen.
Thanks, Deepak. So my primary flaw as a speaker, aside from my content, is not speaking loudly enough. So if you can't hear me in the back, yell, and the MC will turn up the mic here. Greetings. Welcome. This is awesome. I can't believe how many people are actually here. Last I heard from Scott Johnston, we had a little over 750 people registered, which is so completely mind-boggling. I can't even believe it. I'm glad all 750 of them aren't trying to crowd in here. How many of you is this your first PuppetConf or Puppet Camp ever? That is freaking cool. So welcome, thank you. And I mean thank you in a personal way, right? Because we do all this work in the bubble at Puppet Labs, but you people are the ones out on the front lines actually reinventing IT and automation and infrastructure. So without you, we literally wouldn't have jobs, so thank you. I'm Randall, I'm our head of design, and I'm going commando today, which is to say that this is my only slide, so I hope you like it. I do have notes because I'm not a savant. I don't have everything memorized, but I've done this all year. I've not had a deck, and I found that I really like it. So come afterwards and tell me if you're tired of staring at me and you'd rather have a deck. The other thing I may do is jump down on the floor and pace a bit. So I'm going to be talking about... Uh-oh. Ooh, now we're back. All right. I'm going to be talking about design and user experience. Well, not allergic to the word. And how they work at Puppet and how they work for you. We started a little late. I'm going to take about 35 minutes probably. So there might not be time for questions, but please interrupt. And I say this all the time and actually really mean it. This talk's about you, it's not about me. So if I'm not saying something that's interesting to you, raise your hand. If you need clarification, happy to take questions at any point. My theme today, to the extent that I have one, is that the user experience of Puppet's products is a reflection of us as a company. As we become a better company, as we become better at designing and building and shipping software and products, the user experience of those products will be better. So it's not about me leading the design team. It's not about the design team or engineering or any part of the company. It's about the company as a whole. We're all pulling together to be great at design. When someone asks me how many designers we have at Puppet, I say, I don't know, about 40, I think, or maybe 50, because everyone who commits code is a designer. That's our firm belief. So design, I've already said it, design, user experience, and people call me out all the time because I tend to use these words interchangeably when, in fact, they really aren't. So what is the difference between design and user experience? This is something that I torment interviewees with all the time. I've interviewed probably 40 designers this year, and I always ask them the very first thing, what's the difference between design and user experience? And my favorite answer ever, the best thing I've heard, is one guy who said, design is about me, and user experience is about everyone else. And that's so true that I've stolen it ever since then, and that's what I say. Design itself, I've always said, is making decisions. It's just that simple thing, the process of making decisions. User experience is a strategy and a practice by which we try to make the right decisions for real customers. And user experience from your perspective is your interaction with our design. So thinking about it that way, anything you interact with is user experience. Turns out the user experience at Puppet is 5 things. Now I'm going to start pacing. So the first thing, believe it or not, the first thing that we apply user experience and design principles to is the command line. The command line is still how most people get most of their value from Puppet most of the time. And it's not surprising. That's exactly the way it should be. The command line is efficient, it's explicit, it's direct. Many of you, I'm guessing, spend the vast majority of your lives living on the command line. Who lives in a terminal almost all day? Yeah, right. So that's not me anymore. I've always got a couple of Vim sessions open on my laptop. But I spent about a decade of my life just working exclusively in the terminal, and it's fantastic when it works. It's glorious. Opening a terminal in OS X feels to me like cutting a window through the operating system into the computer itself, into the inner workings of it. And that's powerful. It's fabulous. I find often that I'll open a terminal to get to a directory to open it in Finder, because it's faster to open the terminal and tab complete some long directory than to tool around in the GUI. And just for that reason only, the fact that it is so efficient and so effective makes the command line worthy of UX attention. And it's the most important thing we have. What we've done this year that I think is the coolest on the command line is the Puppet module tool. We've launched 2 versions of it so far. Ryan Coleman is the product owner for the Forge, and he's going to be talking about the Forge, I think, 2 times over the next couple days. So go see him. He is awesome. He's going to be talking about the Puppet module tool, which is not the best thing we will ever do in terms of command line design and implementation, but the best thing we've done so far. And believe it or not, we've actually user tested a command line tool. That's not something I've seen anybody else do. Kelsey Hightower, who is here and talking today, was the first person to do that, to run a standard user test on a command line tool and then use the results of that test to affect the product before we shipped it. The next thing is the GUI, the graphical user interface, the point and drool interface, right? And I have mixed feelings about the GUI. The first time I ever used Linux, I got a book about Red Hat that said basically only suckers use the GUI back in 1997. But it turns out that for some things, a GUI smokes the command line, and the primary reason for that is context. You can have context on the command line, but it's in small bits and it's really difficult, right? You can customize your prompt so it shows you your current directory or the machine you're logged into or your Git branch or what have you. The other thing you need for context on the command line is a big brain and a lot of practice at remembering a bunch of tiny little things. Things that are second nature to a lot of people in the Unix world or sysadmins, like cd dash or cd dot dot to navigate around a directory structure, are actually very difficult for normals to learn because they're not used to remembering all those tiny little bits of scent trail in the operating system. They're not used to remembering where they were last time, where the directory used to be, where they used to be in the directory structure. But in the GUI, you have context. In the GUI, there are fewer things to think about. You have to make fewer decisions if the GUI is done right. And just for that reason, it's very powerful. We have now 2 types of GUI in Puppet, which is interesting. And the first is what we've had for a while. It's the open source dashboard, the Puppet Enterprise console, and the Forge. And these are browser-based applications or web-based applications. They're interactive. They're designed to get a job done. And then we have a second thing for which Deepak over here is primarily responsible, which is the status page for PuppetDB. And this is not interactive. This just displays to you the current state of affairs and a reasonable view back into history. Because it turns out that tailing a log file or looking at a log file is really good to find out what happened 5 seconds ago, but not so great for a minute ago or an hour ago, or especially the difference between now and an hour ago. So something we want to do in the future is build a status page for all our open source services, modeled after Deepak's work on PuppetDB. What I think is one of the coolest things we've done this year for the GUI is role-based access control in the console. And the first reason it's cool is that people were begging us for it. Now, that kind of makes me sad that anybody has to beg us to do something, but on the other hand, it saves a lot of time, right? We don't have to do a whole lot of investigation if we really know that people need something. The second great thing about it is that it was minimal. We launched the first version. It had the smallest feature set we could possibly imagine, the simplest user interface. So rather than spending a year building something huge and monolithic, we spent a couple months building something very small and fired it off into the world at a high level of quality, and we're really happy with. Another great thing about it is that not only was the GUI designed well, but it was architected well. It was built well from a code perspective. Built to be extensible, built with a good authentication framework that in the future we can expand. And my fourth favorite thing about it is we've actually done that when we released Puppet Enterprise 2.6. Now the console auth works with LDAP and Active Directory. LDAP and Active Directory and Google Apps, which is approximately the coolest thing ever. And we're going to continue to do this, make small releases, small changes, get bits of functionality out into the world rather than try to ship a battleship once a year. The next thing that we consider worthy of user experience attention and tools of Puppet is the DSL, the domain-specific language. When we talk about software-defined infrastructure, this is the software that we think of as defining your infrastructure. The DSL allows you to model your infrastructure, and that's a tremendously powerful concept. We didn't invent the idea of modeling something in software, but we believe that we do it very well. Modeling is a big advance, because if you have something modeled, then you're not telling your computer how to do it. You're telling your computer what to do. Telling your computer how to do something is micromanagement. And who really has time for that? I don't want to tell my computer all the steps necessary to get from point A to point B. That's called programming. I would rather tell my computer where I want to end up. And have the computer make, by the computer, of course, I mean the software that we slave away on, make appropriate decisions in order to get there in a trusted way. So the DSL allows this, it encourages this. You can do bad things in the DSL, but for the most part, it creates a model of your infrastructure that the rest of Puppet can introspect. And so we can apply standard UX tools to it, like learnability, memorability, error handling, efficiency. One great thing we've done in the DSL this year is integrate HIRA. HIRA is structured data stored outside of your Puppet manifest. This is something that software engineers have been talking about for quite a while, that you shouldn't have code and data mixed together. And it's been a problem in Puppet. It's something that has challenged us for quite some time. But Ari wrote HIRA, Ari, the guy who wrote M Collective. And it's not the greatest thing ever. 5 years from now, we may not be using HIRA, but HIRA is pretty awesome. And it really solves a problem that a lot of people have today. Ari, sadly, is not going to be here. But Kelsey Hightower is, and he's talking about HIRA and data separation and ENCs. So if you have a chance, you should go see Kelsey talk about that. External APIs, that's the next thing worthy of UX attention. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be all like highfalutin about worthy of UX attention. I just mean that there are only so many hours in a day and only so many things we can do. And yeah, we'd love to pay attention to everything, but let's get real. We've got a list of things in order of importance. External APIs. Almost all the services have APIs. Most of them are pretty good. From a selfish perspective, what we get from an API is better software engineering practice. Right? You don't want, it's what people have been knocking Ruby on Rails for ages, right? That you have this gigantic monolithic application and you can have any kind of logic in any part of it regardless of what convention they say. And so it turns out to be this unmaintainable nightmare after you use it for a while. But instead, if you go the Unix route and have a bunch of small services hooked together across documented simple APIs, then your software becomes better almost automatically. It's more maintainable, it's simpler, it's easier to plug in and change the things that you need to change. But from a non-selfish perspective, what an API means is that we don't own your data, that our software doesn't own your data, that we can store data in any crazy way we want, in MongoDB or MySQL or Postgres, and that it doesn't matter, that you don't have to care, that if we provide you a first-class API to get to the data, then you really own it, and you can do what you like with it. And that's the second thing, is we can't anticipate every use case you have. There are companies that try to do this. They try to cram everything possible into the GUI. Microsoft is notorious for doing this in their system management tools. Every functionality must be exposed at all times in the GUI. We're not going to do that. We don't want to do that. We'd much rather provide a good API to allow you to put our product to unexpected use. because after all, it is your data, not ours. One of the best things we've done with external APIs this year is PuppetDB. PuppetDB has a good API. It's documented. We just released version 1 last week. It's going, no, this week, right? It's going to be, the API is going to be versioned on the next release, following the best practice we have. It's a well thought out API. Deepak and his team created use cases and user stories for the API to test whether or not people would be able to accomplish the tasks they needed to. And Deepak and Nick are both speaking here. Deepak's talking, as he shamelessly said, at 2 o'clock about PuppetDB. Nick Lewis is talking about the Puppet data library, of which PuppetDB is one component. So go see those guys. And lastly, the fifth thing that demands UX attention in Puppet is the internal API. Who's used the Ruby DSL? Yeah, right. So I don't blame you. The Ruby DSL has been a bit of a redheaded stepchild for a while. We released it a couple years ago with great hopes and plans, and we haven't maintained it as well as we would like to. So that sucks. But the good news is that something that I've seen us do at Puppet in the 18 months I've been there is give interns impossible jobs. And this is one of my favorite things to do as well. Talking with interns, this tends not to be the way people treat them. Interns get work that real programmers don't want to do. They do a bunch of automated, repetitive crap, or they fix a bunch of low priority bugs that someone feels they can trust them with. At Puppet, what we do is give interns work that turns real programmers pale and makes them afraid. So we got a guy from Google Summer of Code, and I'm going to, Matish, all right. And he, Mateus, no, there's an SZ in it. So this is the one time when I need a slide because somebody might be able to pronounce this guy's name because I never met him, he's remote. And we gave him the Ruby DSL, and foolishly, because he had no experience with Puppet, he said, yeah, I'll try that, and he did it. And so we have a Ruby DSL, which we're going to release in Puppet 3.1. It's not finished yet, it's not production worthy yet, but it's really very good. It fixes a lot of the bugs in the previous DSL. It adds functionality that the current DSL has that the previous Ruby DSL did not have. And more to the point, it's a better citizen of Ruby. If you write Ruby for a living, you should be able to look at this DSL and feel very comfortable, very at home. That's tremendously exciting. Dan Bodie is going to be talking, I believe, later today about the rest of our internal APIs and how you do work in Puppet to extend Puppet itself when just getting access to the data isn't enough, when you actually need to change things and make them different. So those 5 things, the command line, the GUI, the DSL, the external APIs, the internal APIs, that's what we consider UX at Puppet. So how do we do this? And the most important thing, way to solve a problem is to find great people and put those great people on it. And problems tend to go away when you do that. You find somebody fantastic, you put them on a problem, and pretty soon not only has that problem gone away, but every problem that looks like it and every problem that's next to it has gone away. So this is the type of people we're trying to find. And our finding process has been really good. As I said, I've interviewed probably 40 designers this year, and it's been punishing, but we now have myself and 8 other people on the UX team. So I'm going to break it down quickly for you because it's a big investment, and I want to try to convince you that it's going to help you, and that it makes sense for us to have, it makes sense for us to do this. The first thing is, most obviously, right, is all the stuff, all the paraphernalia that you've seen around this conference center. The signs, the slide deck, Luke talked about this a bit. Peter Irby, we hired a visual designer months ago, and Peter's been doing that. And he has a great eye for this type of work. But what he's done here at PuppetConf is the least important part of his work, and it's only been a couple weeks of that work with the marketing team. What he's been working on also with the marketing team right now is our website, redesigning the Puppet website. And by redesign, I don't mean reskin or retheme. We're not talking about making something necessarily prettier or shinier, but refactoring it, recreating the content where necessary, refactoring the information architecture so it's a better tool so that it actually works better for the people who need it. If you see Peter around here, he's the hippest guy in our office, so he should, which for Portland is saying something. You should be able to recognize him. Here's how hip the kid is, right? He makes ukuleles, but he doesn't play them. So we have 4 interaction designers. We have 2 on the Puppet Enterprise team, 1 on the Forge team, and 1 on the Puppet Platform team. And these are the people that you'd think of the most when you talk about user experience. They're to some degree generalists. They can do a lot of the tasks that we think about in user experience, a bit of visual design. They can do interaction design. These people work directly with engineering and with product to ship product, because that's what we say design does at Puppet. Design ships product. We don't create fancy mock-ups. We don't create detailed specifications. We create the lowest fidelity, crappiest looking artifacts we possibly can to communicate with customers, to communicate with engineering, and then sit down and actually build and ship the product. And the last thing we have is researchers. We have 2 user researchers. Now, has anyone heard of user research before? Yeah, right, this seems really funky. It seems strange to me even, and it's part of what I do for a living. If UX is, as I say, your interaction with our product, then it's hard to dodge responsibility for when something goes wrong. You can make excuses. You can say, oh, we didn't expect anyone to use this application on a tablet. Or, well, we designed this application to be used for auditing after the fact, not for diagnosing a fire when it was happening. And so it doesn't matter if it takes 15 seconds to load the page. But you know what? Those are arguments from ignorance. Those aren't good reasons. And our ignorance is our own fault. It turns out that it's actually really difficult to stay connected to the real world, to customers and clients, when you're inside a bubble, when you're inside a company. We just hired Eric Sorensen from Apple, and if there's someone from here, Apple, I'm sorry, I hope we didn't piss you off, but you had him for a while, and now we've got him, and he's awesome. But a year from now, he's not going to, sorry.
You're lucky.
We are lucky.
Yeah, he's really lucky.
A year from now, he's not going to remember all the details of what it's like to do the day-to-day work. And it's not a knock on him, it's a knock on everyone. What we do at Puppet is software. We build software, we don't build infrastructure. Nobody at Puppet is actually responsible every single day for maintaining 5,000 nodes. So how do we remember what this is like? And you can talk to people, you can have anecdotal evidence, but what user research does is apply a methodology to this process and apply tools. And I'm not going to talk about all the tools. There are personas and user stories and ethnographic research, and there's all sorts of stuff that people in the profession talk about. But the most important thing is user testing. That is, spend a short amount of time a week creating a simple prototype. Put that prototype in front of a half dozen people, give them a list of tasks, see if they can accomplish those tasks. And then take what you've learned, and what you have almost certainly learned is you were completely wrong and your design sucks. Go back to the drawing board and do it again, and do it again and again. And over the course of a few weeks or a month, you've run this design by 20 real people in the real world who have real problems. And then you have a pretty good idea of what's going to work and what isn't going to work. A good UX professional, a good UX generalist can do this type of work, but it takes a lot of time to recruit people, to set up the scheduling, to watch the video and analyze the results. And so we have 2 people at Puppet who are dedicated to doing exactly that. And the product of their work is the Puppet Test Pilots program. This is, first of all, it's a sweet t-shirt. Look at this, how awesome is this? So if you want one of these t-shirts, go upstairs and there's a table. And we have 5 prototypes in various stages of completeness, from the DSL to test on the Forge to the Enterprise Console, things that are sketches, that are ideas, that are theories that we have that we think may work. And we want to test those with you. It's not a test of you, it's not the certification. It's us putting something in front of you and saying, we're probably wrong about this. Help us figure out exactly where and how we're wrong. So that's it, in fact. That is design and user experience at Puppet.
Yeah, I was actually in the training for the past couple of days, the Puppet training, and it was providers, all that kind of stuff. One thing that struck me was that we don't seem to have name spacing for types, functions, modules at this point, and there is no, and I was told by the trainers that there is no roadmap right now to provide the namespace ability for different components that we define in Ruby. So the problem that I see is that at this point, I mean, in my company right now, at this point, there are multiple teams, disjoint teams that are allocated to do different components of automation, and I'm afraid that they will end up kind of defining, say, the same type or same provider
Yeah.
with the same name that would end up clashing what I would have defined somewhere else, and in fact, I mean, that kind of prevents code reuse when multiple teams are managing a very large infrastructure.
Yeah, I hear that.
So that is-
So, so what the gentleman's asking is namespacing for types and providers. Who would care about this? Who has this problem? All right, so that's a fifth of us maybe. Okay, that's real, that's interesting. That's not something that, it's not on our roadmap. It's something that if you ask Luke, Luke would probably say, don't do that.
And
But that,
the solution I was provided was just use your department name underscore your type name. And
Yeah,
is
no,
just a
that sucks.
convention, and it sounds like a hack. I cannot just go back to my manager and say that I'm just trying to implement this kind of a convention just to make sure that I'm not stepping onto another team that is providing some different components for a large automation framework.
yeah, no, that's a horrible hack. I'll make a ticket. I'll make a ticket for it, and I'll talk with the guys on the platform team. It's a good idea.
We actually do have a mic back there, so people on the behind the projectors, that way people on the screen could actually
Oh, right.
hear what's going on.
All right, hear me? Good. So I've been using Puppet for about 4 years, and I've gone through various iterations of internal API changes. Is there any plans, goals, hopes to be able to have like a version spec for the Puppet modules to say that this is internal API 1.0 and it will continue to work, like this code will continue to work under version spec 1.0 for the internal API?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's in order to be complete, in order to be a good citizen, an API needs to be documented and versioned. And if it's not both of those things, then it's by definition not a good citizen. We haven't been very good at that, and it sucks, and I'm sorry. I don't know exactly what our plans are for it, but talk to me afterwards, and I'll find out, and we'll make that more public, because it's something that people care about that we don't think about as much ourselves. All right. Yep.
Hello. Continuing on the topic of versioning, I think it's important that everything that administrators define, say types and providers, they also should be versioned, because I might want to evolve my type, and I would my entire infrastructure might not be immediately forward compatible with the new types that I'm pushing into the production systems. So again, a versioning mechanism that doesn't clobber the previous version, or doesn't do something wrong, because some systems, some hosts are running the older version of some types of providers, some provider code that is not compatible with the new one. I mean, that kind of mismatch
Right.
should not happen. So there has to be some kind of a mechanism that prevents that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Versioning for types and providers, that's important as namespacing.
Hello. The stack that we kind of deploy at our company is Ruby on Rails. It makes it kind of difficult for all the Ruby on Rails people out there. I'm sure you probably feel me. So I'm kind of struggling. I'm looking for groups of people maybe to discuss how they've solved some of these problems. Another problem that we have is also in regards to, we have an application team responsible for their Puppet work, and then we have system operations who does system like Linux stuff. So what I wanted to do was, I don't really want to have like a repository within version control that each team can see everything. I'm wondering if it's possible we can have separate Puppet instances that can run on our environment so they don't stomp on each other and not trying to reinvent the wheel, but can run
Yeah.
in two different spaces, like using the environments type thing.
You could set that up.
Is it possible?
There's got to be a better way
Okay.
to munge the authentication than just to set up environments and to do it that way.
Okay.
Talk with me afterwards, and
Yeah.
I'll hook you up with an engineer. And regarding Rails and deploying Rails, so first, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's a nightmare.
And second, have you engaged with the Puppet users list or the IRC channel on this issue? because-
I've talked with, is it Ohed Levy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've talked with him quite a bit.
I thought I saw him in back. So yeah, but fire off a question to Puppet users, and if you don't get traction, fire it off again, right? I mean, that often works for me. You send something
Yeah.
to a mailing list one day and people are having a bad week, and you send it off a week later and you get a bunch of responses. You're not the only one who has to deploy Rails with Puppet, and I'm sure there are clever and efficient ways to do it that a lot of people haven't considered.
Cool. Thank you very much.
All right, so I should cut this off. We've hit our time. Should let you all get on to your next thing. Thank you.